He once said a single sentence that made the entire American underworld tremble. "You saved my life. I'll spend your entire lifetime repaying it." She believed she was his savior. But from that moment on, she became something else entirely, a golden canary trapped inside the gilded cage of a mafia boss. Love was no longer hers to choose. Freedom became a luxury she could only dream of. And the child growing quietly inside her was bound to the man who held her fate in his hands. New York was never kind to people who hesitated. Elena Moore learned that lesson on a rain-soaked night when the city seemed to hold its breath. The clock on her dashboard glowed, 17 a.m. Red traffic lights blurred into trembling streaks through the windshield, distorted by rain and exhaustion. Elena loosened her grip on the steering wheel, trying to shake off the heaviness in her chest. Another 20-hour shift at the hospital. Another night where sleep felt like a luxury she no longer remembered how to afford. She should have driven past the alley. Every instinct told her to. The street was nearly deserted, the kind of silence that felt unnatural in Manhattan. Rain hammered the asphalt, pooling at the edges of the road like dark mirrors. Then she saw him collapsed near a dumpster, half hidden by shadow. One knee bent unnaturally, one hand pressed hard against his chest. Blood. Too much blood. Elena's foot hovered over the brake. "This isn't your responsibility. Call 911 and leave." But her body betrayed her before her mind could catch up. The car slowed. Stopped. She stepped out into the rain. "Sir!" Her voice trembled. Swallowed by the storm. No response. Up close. He looked unreal. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in an impeccably tailored black coat now ruined by rain and crimson stains. His face was pale, sharp lines carved as if by intention rather than chance. Even unconscious, there was something commanding about him, something that made the night itself seem to lean closer. Elena knelt beside him, ignoring the rain soaking through her coat. Her fingers brushed his wrist's strong pulse, erratic but present. Relief flickered, chased immediately by fear. A gunshot wound. She sucked in a breath. Oh God! Her training took over. She tore open her bag, hands moving automatically, pressing cloth against the wound. He groaned faintly, lashes fluttering. Dark eyes opened. They were the most unsettling eyes she had ever seen. Sharp, focused, awake in a way no injured man should be. For a split second, Elena felt as though she had been the one found bleeding in an alley, and he was deciding whether to let her live. "You shouldn't." His voice was low, rough, edged with something dangerous. "Be here." "I'm a doctor," she said quickly, though she wasn't sure why she felt the need to justify herself. "You've been shot. I need to stop the bleeding." A corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. "That's unfortunate." Before she could ask what he meant, his head rolled to the side, consciousness slipping away. Sirens wailed in the distance. Elena froze. Instinct screamed at her to call for help, to flag down the ambulance she could already hear approaching. But something about him, about the tension coiled beneath his stillness, made her hesitate. She noticed it then. The earpiece barely visible beneath his hair, the faint outline of a weapon at his waist, the way his fingers, even unconscious, curled as if ready to strike. This wasn't a random victim. This was a man who lived in a world where blood and violence were familiar companions. The sirens grew louder. Elena made a decision she would spend the rest of her life paying for. She dragged him toward her car. It took all her strength to lift him into the back seat, rain soaking her hair, her hands slick with blood that was not her own. Her heart hammered painfully against her ribs as she drove not toward the hospital, but away from the sirens, toward the unknown. He didn't wake during the drive. Elena worked in silence once they reached her apartment, transforming her small living room into a makeshift operating space. She cut away fabric, cleaned the wound, removed the bullet with trembling precision. Every breath felt like a borrowed one. When she finally stepped back, dawn was breaking. She sank onto the floor, exhaustion crashing over her in waves. She told herself she had done the right thing. She told herself she would call the police once he was stable. She told herself a lot of lies. He woke at noon. Elena was in the kitchen when she felt a presence, sharp and unmistakable. She turned slowly. He was standing in the doorway, shirtless, bandaged, awake. His gaze swept the room, calculating, controlled. Before settling on her, the air shifted, thickened. "You took a risk," he said calmly. "Bringing me here." Elena swallowed. "You would have died." "Maybe." He studied her like a puzzle. "Most people would have let me." She lifted her chin. "Most people aren't doctors." Silence stretched between them. Then he smiled. It was not a kind smile. "Adrian Blackwood," he said. "You saved my life." Something in his tone made her chest tighten. "You don't owe me anything," she said quickly. "Once you're healed, you can leave. I won't tell anyone." His eyes darkened. "That's where you're wrong." "Elena Moore." Her breath caught. "How do you know my name?" He stepped closer. Too close. She could feel his presence like heat against her skin. "I don't like debts," Adrian continued softly, "and I never leave loose ends." Fear crept up her spine. "What are you saying I'm saying?" he murmured. "That saving me came at a price." Her phone buzzed suddenly on the counter. A message flashed across the screen. "Unknown number. She's safe. Bring the car around." Elena's blood turned cold. Adrian followed her gaze, then looked back at her with something unreadable in his eyes. "You see," he said quietly, "from the moment you stopped that car, your life stopped being yours." Outside, black vehicles lined the street. Men in suits waited patiently in the rain. Elena realized, too late, that she had not rescued a wounded man that night. She had invited a storm into her life, and it had no intention of leaving. If this story touched your heart, follow the channel to enjoy many more heart-stirring stories every week. Elena did not remember agreeing to anything. Yet when she opened her eyes the next morning, she was no longer in her apartment, nor in a hospital bed. She lay beneath silk sheets the color of ivory, surrounded by a room so vast and quiet it felt unreal. Sunlight filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting soft gold across marble floors and pale walls adorned with abstract art she could not begin to name. For a long moment, she wondered if she had finally collapsed from exhaustion and slipped into a dream. Then she tried to sit up and felt the subtle resistance. Not restraints, not chains, something worse. The unspoken certainty that she was being watched. "Elena." His voice came from the far side of the room, low and unhurried. Adrian Blackwood stood near the windows, dressed in a charcoal suit as if he were about to attend a board meeting rather than loom over the woman who had dragged him back from death. The bandage beneath his shirt was invisible, but she knew it was there. She could almost feel the warmth of his blood on her hands again. "Where am I?" she asked, forcing her voice to remain steady. "My house," he replied. "You'll be safe here." She swung her legs over the bed. The carpet was thick beneath her bare feet, soft enough to swallow sound. "I didn't agree to come here." Adrian turned toward her, his expression unreadable. "No. But you didn't refuse either." Her jaw tightened. "You brought me here without my consent." "Yes." He said it simply, without apology. Anger flared, sharp and sudden. "You can't do that. I have a job, patience, a life." "You had a life," Adrian corrected gently, one that brushed too close to mine. He approached her slowly, as if wary of startling something fragile. Elena forced herself not to step back. "I'm not your enemy," he continued. "But the moment you chose to help me, you stepped into a war you don't understand." "Then let me leave," she said. "I won't say a word to anyone, I swear." Adrian studied her face, his gaze lingering not with desire but with calculation. "You wouldn't survive." She laughed bitterly. That's not for you to decide. It is, he said, because people are already looking for the woman who pulled me out of that alley. Her breath caught. Who, she asked. Adrian's eyes darkened. Men who don't forgive interference? Silence stretched between them, heavy with implication. You're safer here, he said finally, until things settle. And how long will that be, she demanded. His lips curved slightly. That depends on you. Days passed in a strange, disorienting blur. Elena was given clothes-tailored dresses, soft sweaters, shoes that fit as if they had been chosen with her measurements in mind. Meals arrived precisely when she grew hungry. Every request was answered before she fully voiced it. Except one. May I go outside? She asked one evening, standing across from Adrian in the dining room. He paused, glass of whiskey midway to his lips. No, just the garden, she pressed. I need air. You have air, he replied calmly. Filtered? Clean? She stared at him. You're keeping me here. I'm protecting you by locking me in a cage made of silk. His eyes flickered. Something sharp passed through them. Annoyance, perhaps, or something closer to guilt. You're not locked in. She walked to the door and tried the handle. It didn't budge. Adrian didn't move. When she turned back, her hands were trembling. This isn't protection. It's imprisonment. He set his glass down. Imprisonment would involve punishment. You're being given comfort. That's not the same thing. No, he agreed softly. It's better. Her chest tightened. Why me? For the first time since she'd met him. Adrian hesitated. You saved me, he said. And people like me don't get saved for free. At night, Elena struggled to sleep. The house was too quiet, too vast. Sometimes she thought she heard footsteps outside her door, the subtle presence of guards she never saw but always felt. Other times, she woke with the sensation of being watched, her heart racing in the dark. Adrian never touched her without permission. That, somehow, made it worse. He would sit across from her in the evenings, discussing nothing and everything art, politics, business. He never spoke of the blood on his hands or the empire she suspected he ruled. Yet danger clung to him like a second skin. You don't have to entertain me, she said one night, folding her arms. I want to, he replied. Why? His gaze held hers. Because you don't look at me like everyone else. And how do they look at you? Like a weapon, he said quietly. Or a god. Elena swallowed. And how do I look at you? He leaned back slightly, considering. Like a man who can bleed. The air shifted between them. The first crack in her resolve came on the 5th night. She woke with a fever, chills racking her body. By the time she managed to sit up, the room spun violently. The door opened moments later. Adrian crossed the room in long strides, already shrugging out of his jacket. He pressed the back of his hand to her forehead, his touch unexpectedly gentle. You should have told someone, he said. I didn't want. Her voice broke. I didn't want to bother you. His jaw tightened. You don't bother me. He stayed with her through the night, bringing medicine, cooling her skin with damp cloths, speaking in low tones that anchored her drifting consciousness. At some point, half asleep, she felt his hand close around hers. Why are you doing this? She whispered. Adrian didn't answer right away. Because, he said finally, I don't protect what I don't value. The words settled deep in her chest, dangerous and warm. By morning, the fever broke. So did something else. Elena realized that the walls around her were not merely physical. They were emotional, psychological, constructed with care and patience. Adrian was not forcing her to stay through fear alone. He was giving her reasons, safety, stability, attention, affection, measured and controlled. And slowly, terrifyingly, it was working. When she stood by the window later that day, watching the city beyond the glass, she understood the truth she had been avoiding. This house was not a prison because it had locks. It was a prison because part of her no longer wanted to leave. And that frightened her more than Adrian Blackwood ever could. Elena learned that silence could be louder than chains. Days inside Adrian Blackwood's estate followed a rhythm so smooth it felt deliberate, engineered to lull her into forgetting the sharp edge of reality. Morning light spilled across glass walls and pale stone. Breakfast appeared without request. Staff moved like ghosts, polite, distant, trained not to look at her for too long. No one called her a prisoner. No one needed to. She was allowed to wander freely within the house. The library became her refuge rows of books spanning multiple languages, histories of empires built and destroyed, biographies of men who had shaped the world with iron will and blood-stained hands. Elena found herself wondering how many of those men Adrian had studied not as stories, but as blueprints. She did not ask him. Some questions, she sensed, were doors better left closed. Adrian came and went without explanation. Sometimes he disappeared for an entire day, returning after midnight with tension drawn tight across his shoulders. Other times, he lingered sharing meals with her, sitting across the room while she read. His presence heavy yet strangely restrained. He never crossed a line. That restraint unsettled her more than aggression ever could. One afternoon, Elena stood on the balcony overlooking manicured gardens that stretched impossibly far, their symmetry almost unnatural. Beyond the iron gates lay New York distant, blurred, alive. Her old life pulsed somewhere out there, unreachable. "You're thinking about leaving." She didn't turn around. "I'm thinking about breathing without permission." Adrian joined her at the railing. He didn't crowd her space. He never did. "I don't own your thoughts, but you control everything else." His gaze followed hers toward the horizon. "Control keeps people alive. So does freedom." "Freedom," he said quietly, "gets people killed." She looked at him then, really looked. The sharp angles of his face softened in the afternoon light, shadows carving depth beneath his eyes. He looked tired, not physically, something deeper, as though the weight he carried had long since settled into his bones. "Did anyone ever choose this life?" she asked softly. Adrian's jaw tightened. No. That night, Elena dreamed of rain, not the gentle kind, but the violent downpour that had brought her to him in the first place. She woke with her heart racing, sheets tangled around her legs, the echo of gunfire still ringing in her ears. She padded barefoot into the hallway, drawn by a low murmur of voices. Light spilled from a partially open door. Adrian's study. She hesitated, then pushed it open just enough to see inside. Adrian stood behind his desk, sleeves rolled up, knuckles braced against polished wood. A man in a dark suit faced him, tension radiating from his rigid posture. "They know," the man said. "Word's spreading. Someone pulled you out of that alley." Adrian's expression didn't change. "Then tighten security. It's not just about you anymore." The man pressed. "It's about her." Elena's breath caught. "She's a liability." The man continued. "A civilian. Weak point." Adrian's voice dropped, cold and final. "She is not to be touched." A pause. "Understood," the man said, though unease flickered across his face. When the door closed behind him, Adrian remained still for a long moment. Then his shoulders sagged. Just slightly. Elena stepped back before he could sense her presence. Heart pounding. Liability. Weak point. The words clung to her, reshaping everything. The shift came subtly after that. Guards doubled. Doors she hadn't realized were monitored suddenly required authorization. Adrian began insisting she stay closer to the main house. His calm never wavered, but an undercurrent of urgency threaded through his actions. "You're tightening the leash," she accused one evening. "I'm minimizing risk." To whom she shot back. "Me or you?" His gaze locked onto hers. Both. Anger flared, but beneath it was something else: fear. Not for herself, but for the man who stood before her. the one who commanded an empire yet looked cornered by circumstances beyond brute force. She hated that she cared. "You can't keep doing this," she said. "I won't disappear quietly into your world. I'm not asking you to." "Then what do you want?" Adrian stepped closer, stopping just short of touching her. The air between them felt charged, fragile. "I want you alive," he said, "whatever that costs." The words settled between them like a vow neither was ready to name. Weeks passed. Elena began to notice changes within herself. She spoke less of leaving, not because the desire had faded, but because she sensed how deeply it unsettled him. She learned the rhythms of his moods, the tension in his shoulders that signaled danger, the rare stillness that meant exhaustion. She caught him watching her when he thought she wasn't looking, not possessively, as if memorizing her. One evening, as they sat in the library, thunder rolled in the distance, rain lashed against the windows, relentless and familiar. Elena closed her book. "You never talk about your family." Adrian's fingers stilled against the glass of whiskey in his hand. "There's nothing to say. That's rarely true." He exhaled slowly. "They're dead. I'm sorry." "Don't be," he said. It made things simpler. She studied him, the lines carved by years of survival. "Did it?" For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, almost imperceptibly, his head shook. "No." Something in his expression cracked then, not fully, but enough for her to glimpse the man beneath the armor. Impulsively, she reached out. Her fingers brushed his wrist. The contact was light, tentative, yet it sent a jolt through them both. Adrian froze. Elena's breath caught, every instinct screaming that she had crossed an invisible boundary. He didn't pull away. Instead, his hand turned, enclosing hers, not tight, not claiming, but grounding. The world seemed to narrow to that single point of contact. "I'm not fragile," she said softly. "You don't have to protect me from everything." His thumb brushed against her skin, barely there. "You shouldn't have to learn how strong you are in my world." "Maybe," she whispered. "I already have." Their eyes met. The moment stretched dangerous, intimate, unspoken. Then Adrian released her hand and stood abruptly, the spell breaking. "You should get some rest," he said, voice controlled once more. As he left the room, Elena remained seated, her pulse still racing. She realized then that the cage around her was changing shape. It was no longer just made of walls and guards. It was made of shared glances, quiet confessions, and a growing awareness that the most dangerous thing about Adrian Blackwood was not his power, but the way he was slowly, irrevocably, becoming part of her heart. Sophia Carter arrived on a Sunday morning, precisely at 11. Elena knew the moment something changed, not because anyone told her, but because the house itself shifted. The air grew taut, like a held breath. Staff moved faster, quieter. The guards at the front gate straightened, their expressions hardening into something formal and wary. Adrian was not home. That alone unsettled her. Elena stood by the tall windows of the sitting room, watching a sleek silver car glide through the gates. It stopped with practiced elegance, and a woman stepped out as if she belonged there, no hesitation, no curiosity, only ownership. Sophia Carter was beautiful in a way that demanded acknowledgement. Tall, statuesque. Her blonde hair fell in deliberate waves over a tailored cream coat. Her heels clicked against stone with confident precision. Each step measured, assured. She did not look around as though visiting a stranger's home. She looked like someone returning. "Ms. Moore," a staff member said quietly behind Elena. "She insists on seeing you." "I didn't know Adrian was expecting company," Elena replied. "He wasn't," the woman said carefully. That was all Elena needed to hear. Sophia entered the sitting room without waiting for permission. Her gaze swept the space, lingering on Elena with unmistakable interest. She smiled not warmly, but sharply, like a blade polished to gleam. So, Sophia said, "You're real." Elena straightened instinctively. "Excuse me," I wondered. Sophia continued, circling slowly, eyes assessing every detail Elena's dress, her posture, the calm she wore like armor. "People have been whispering. Adrian doesn't hide things without reason." "I don't know what you've heard," Elena said evenly, "but this is his house. If you have business with him, you should speak to him directly." Sophia laughed softly. "Oh, sweetheart, I've done business with Adrian for years." The implication was clear. "I'm Sophia Carter," she added, "though I imagine you've heard my name." Elena hadn't, but the way Sophia said it made that fact irrelevant. The name carried weight all on its own. "I'm Elena," she said simply. Sophia's smile widened. "I know." That sent a chill down Elena's spine. They sat across from each other, the space between them filled with unspoken challenge. Sophia crossed her legs gracefully. "You don't look like what I expected." "What did you expect?" Elena asked. "A type," Sophia replied. "Adrian has one. Intelligent, yes, but distant. Untouchable. He doesn't let people close unless he can control the terms." Elena's fingers curled subtly against her palm. "Then you should know better than to assume anything about me." Sophia tilted her head. "I know exactly what you are. And what's that a complication?" The word landed with deliberate precision. "Elena." Sophia continued softly. "Men like Adrian don't fall in love. They collect. They protect. They discard." Something sharp flared in Elena's chest. "You speak as though you know him intimately." Sophia's eyes gleamed. "I do." She leaned forward slightly. "And I know he doesn't bring women into his home unless they serve a purpose." Silence followed, heavy and charged. "You think I'm here by choice?" Elena asked quietly. Sophia studied her for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, her expression softened just a fraction. "No," she admitted. "I think you're here because you don't yet understand what it costs to leave." Adrian returned that evening. The moment he stepped inside, his gaze went straight to Sophia. His expression tightened not with surprise, but with restrained irritation. "You shouldn't be here," he said flatly. Sophia rose to her feet, unbothered. "You weren't answering my calls. That was intentional." Elena watched the exchange in silence, observing the familiarity between them, the shared history written in every sharp word, every unyielding glance. "This is Elena," Adrian said, his voice measured. "Elena, Sophia Carter." She already introduced herself. Sophia said smoothly. Adrian's jaw clenched. "Then you can leave." Sophia smiled at him, a smile laced with challenge. "You don't get to dismiss me like a stranger." "I do," Adrian replied, "because that's what you are now." The words struck harder than any raised voice. Sophia's smile faltered only briefly. Her gaze flicked to Elena, then back to Adrian. "Is that because of her?" Adrian didn't hesitate. "Yes." Elena's heart stuttered. Sophia exhaled slowly, composure returning like armor snapping back into place. "Then you're making a mistake." She turned to Elena. "Enjoy the house while it lasts." Before Elena could respond, Sophia walked out, heels echoing against marble like a countdown. That night, tension clung to the walls. Elena found Adrian on the terrace, staring out into the darkened gardens. The city lights shimmered beyond, distant and unreachable. "She hates me," Elena said quietly. Adrian didn't turn. "She hates losing." She wasn't lying. Elena continued. "About you?" "No." He agreed. "She wasn't." Elena swallowed. "What was she to you?" He finally faced her. "Someone I trusted once. And now, someone who forgot her place." The coldness in his voice unsettled her. "Do I have a place?" Elena asked softly. Adrian stepped closer, his presence enveloping her without touch. "You're not part of my world's hierarchy. That doesn't answer the question." His gaze softened. Just enough. You're not a position. You're a risk. The honesty startled her. A risk to what she asked. To my control. Thunder rolled overhead, echoing her racing thoughts. Adrian, she said, what happens when people decide I'm more than a complication? He lifted a hand, hesitating before brushing a strand of hair from her face. The gesture was careful, reverent. Then he murmured, I make sure they understand the consequences. She should have been frightened. Instead, warmth spread through her chest, dangerous and undeniable. As rain began to fall, Elena realized that Sophia's arrival had changed everything. Not because it threatened her place, but because it revealed how fiercely Adrian intended to protect it. And protection, she was beginning to understand, was only a step away from possession. The first sign was subtle. Elena blamed it on exhaustion, the strange dizziness that came and went, the faint nausea that lingered in the mornings, the way certain smells suddenly felt unbearable. Life inside Adrian Blackwood's world was tense enough to unsettle anyone. Her body, she reasoned, was merely reacting to stress. She was wrong. The realization came one quiet afternoon in the bathroom, sunlight spilling across marble floors as Elena stared at the thin white stick in her trembling hands. Two unmistakable lines stared back at her, sharp and irreversible. For a long moment, she couldn't breathe. Her reflection in the mirror looked unchanged, still composed. Still controlled, but something fundamental had shifted beneath the surface. A life had begun inside her, fragile and powerful all at once. Adrian's child. The thought sent a wave of fear through her, followed by something far more dangerous. Hope. She didn't tell him right away. Elena needed time to think, to understand what this meant in a world where nothing was simple and no one was safe. A child was not just a blessing here. It was leverage, a vulnerability, a weapon others would not hesitate to use. She became more careful without realizing it. She avoided certain foods. She rested more. Adrian noticed. Of course. He noticed everything. You're pale, he said one evening, studying her across the dining table. Are you unwell? I'm fine, she replied quickly. His eyes narrowed slightly, not in suspicion, but concern. You don't lie well. She forced a small smile. Occupational hazard. Doctors make terrible patients. He accepted the answer, but the tension in his shoulders didn't ease. Sophia Carter did not disappear. She resurfaced quietly, strategically, like poison seeping into water. Invitations Elena never attended began to circulate with whispered speculation, a name spoken too often in rooms Elena would never enter. Who is she to Adrian Blackwood? How long will she last? The whispers grew sharper. When Adrian was away, Elena sensed the tightening net. Security increased again. Staff became more cautious, their gazes flicking to her stomach with questions they dared not voice. The truth, once known, refused to stay hidden. Sophia learned of the pregnancy from someone careless enough to trade information for favor. She arrived unannounced again, her smile thinner, eyes colder. So it's true, Sophia said, standing across from Elena in the sitting room. You're carrying his child. Elena's hand instinctively moved to her abdomen. This is none of your business. Sophia laughed softly. On the contrary, it changes everything. Elena rose to her feet, heart pounding. You should leave. I will, Sophia said calmly. After I make sure you understand something. She stepped closer, her voice lowering. Children are currency in Adrian's world, and currencies are fought over. Fear crawled up Elena's spine. Are you threatening me? Sophia smiled. I'm warning you. Elena told Adrian that night. She waited until they were alone, until the house settled into its nocturnal quiet. Her hands trembled as she spoke the words, but once they left her lips, there was no taking them back. I'm pregnant. For a heartbeat. Adrian didn't react. Then the world seemed to tilt. He stared at her, expression unreadable, something raw flickering beneath his composure. "Are you sure?" "Yes." Silence stretched between them, heavy and charged. Then Adrian exhaled slowly, as if steadying himself. "My child," he said quietly. Elena searched his face for fear, anger, anything that might signal rejection. Instead, she found resolve. "No one will touch you," he said, voice steel-edged. "Or the baby." "You can't promise that," she whispered. "I can," he replied. "And I will." His hand hovered near her waist, hesitant, before settling lightly against her side, not possessive, but protective. The gesture made her throat tighten. "This changes things," she said. "Yes," Adrian agreed, "it does." She didn't know whether to be relieved or terrified. The danger came sooner than either of them expected. It happened on a morning bathed in soft light, the kind that felt deceptively peaceful. Elena was walking through the garden when a sudden sharp pain lanced through her abdomen. Her breath hitched, panic flaring instantly. "Adrian?" she whispered, reaching for her phone, and then everything blurred. She woke to chaos. Voices overlapped. Footsteps thundered. The sharp scent of antiseptic burned her nose as she was rushed through halls she barely recognized. Her blood pressures dropping. "Get him on the line, now!" Adrian's voice cut through the noise, raw and furious. "If she loses this child, I'll burn every last one of them to the ground." Elena tried to speak, to tell him she was awake, but darkness pulled her under again. She came back slowly, the world filtered through beeping monitors and muted light. Adrian was there, sitting beside her bed, his hand wrapped tightly around hers as if anchoring himself to her pulse. "You scared me," he said hoarsely. She swallowed. "The baby," he nodded. "Alive. But you need rest." Tears slipped down her temples. "Someone did this." "Yes," he said, "and they will regret it." She turned her head slightly, meeting his gaze. "Adrian, if this child puts a target on my back, it puts a target on everyone else." He interrupted. The ferocity in his voice made her shiver. Sophia denied everything, of course, but Adrian didn't need proof the way courts did. He operated on instinct, on patterns he understood better than anyone else. Elena watched from the shadows as the world around them shifted. Allies chose sides. Enemies made mistakes. Adrian's empire moved with ruthless precision. Yet amid the chaos, something unexpected happened. Elena stopped feeling like a captive. Adrian consulted her not about his business, but about their future, about safety, about the child's name. "I won't raise a child in a cage," she told him one night. He looked at her steadily. "Then we build a world where cages aren't necessary." "You'd change everything for this," she asked. "For you," he corrected. "And for our child?" The words wrapped around her heart, frightening and intoxicating all at once. But somewhere in the city, resentment fermented. Sophia watched, her rage calcifying into something darker. Losing Adrian was one thing. Losing to Elena, an outsider, an unexpected variable, was another. She wasn't finished. And Elena, lying awake at night with one hand pressed over her growing belly, sensed it. The war was no longer about power or pride. It was about legacy. And the child growing quietly inside her had become the most dangerous piece on the board. Elena learned, slowly and painfully, that survival in Adrian Blackwood's world did not belong to the strongest or the cruelest, but to the most patient. After the incident in the garden, the house transformed. Not outwardly. The marble floors still gleamed. The garden still bloomed with unnatural perfection. But beneath the elegance, something hardened. Security tightened into a near impenetrable web. New faces appeared, men and women with watchful eyes, their loyalty written in the way they moved before Adrian even spoke. And Elena understood the truth with unsettling clarity. Her body was no longer just her own. It was territory. Adrian never said it aloud, but she felt it in everything he did. The way his hand hovered near her back when they walked. The way his gaze swept a room before she entered it. The way his voice dropped into something lethal whenever her safety was mentioned. "You don't need to be afraid," he told her one night as they stood in the bedroom overlooking the darkened city. "I won't let anything happen to you." Elena rested a hand over her stomach, feeling the faint, secret rhythm of life beneath her skin. "That's what scares me." He frowned. "Why?" "Because the more you protect me," she said softly, "the more dangerous I become." Adrian said nothing, but his jaw tightened. What Elena did not say, what she could not afford to say, was that fear alone would not keep her alive. Only strategy would. She began to change her behavior subtly. She stopped challenging Adrian so openly. She softened her tone, allowed moments of silence to linger instead of filling them with resistance. She let him believe she was settling into the role he had built around her, protected, dependent, compliant. It wasn't a lie. It was camouflage. "You've been quieter," Adrian observed one evening as they shared dinner. "I'm tired," Elena replied truthfully, "and thinking doesn't always require speaking." He studied her, searching for something beneath her calm. "Thinking about what the future," she said. "Our child." That, at least, disarmed him. Behind closed doors, Elena listened. She paid attention to the names spoken when Adrian thought she was asleep. She memorized patterns when security rotated, which hallways were avoided at certain hours, how long Adrian's absences lasted. Most importantly, she learned who feared Adrian and who merely pretended not to. Sophia Carter's name surfaced again and again, never spoken directly to Elena, but always present like a shadow cast from a hidden flame. "You shouldn't be moving around the house alone," Adrian said one afternoon, blocking her path gently but firmly. "Not yet." "Because of Sophia?" she asked. His expression darkened. "Because of anyone who thinks hurting you is the fastest way to hurt me." The words lodged deep in her chest. "You're not invincible," Elena said quietly. "No," he agreed. "But I am thorough." She wondered how long thoroughness could hold back obsession. The charity gala was Adrian's idea. "You need to be seen," he said, fastening the clasp of a diamond necklace around her throat. "Not hidden." Elena met his gaze in the mirror. "Or you need me visible. Both can be true." The event was held in Manhattan, in a ballroom so opulent it felt unreal. Crystal chandeliers, flowing gowns, voices dipped in practiced charm. Elena moved through the room at Adrian's side, her smile serene, her spine straight. She felt eyes on her from every direction: curiosity, envy, calculation, and then hostility. Sophia stood near the bar, draped in black silk, watching them with an expression that was almost calm. Almost. Their eyes met. Sophia smiled. Elena knew then that pretending would no longer be enough. The attack didn't come with screams or guns. It came with a glass of wine. Elena barely registered the taste before something felt wrong, a heat spreading too fast. Too sharp. Her fingers tightened around the stem. Adrian noticed instantly. "Elena," he said, already moving toward her. "What's wrong?" Her vision swam. "I don't feel—" She collapsed into his arms. The room erupted into chaos. She woke in darkness, the scent of antiseptic heavy in the air. Her first instinct was to reach for her stomach. A wave of relief nearly broke her when she felt it still there. Still alive. Adrian sat beside her bed, his expression carved from stone. Rage radiated from him, cold and absolute. "They tried to poison you," he said. Elena swallowed. "Sophia." "Yes." Her fingers curled weakly around his sleeve. "Did you—" "No," he said sharply. "Not yet." The pause before those words terrified her. "You can't keep answering violence with more violence," she whispered. Adrian leaned closer, his voice dropping. This isn't vengeance. It's deterrence. And what happens when deterrence fails? His eyes softened just for her. Then I end the threat. In the days that followed, Elena realized something profound. Adrian's world revolved around control, but hers, if she wanted, one would have to revolve around influence. She asked for small things: a phone call to a charity director, permission to attend prenatal appointments alone, time in the garden without guards hovering within arm's reach. Adrian resisted at first. Then, gradually, he relented. You're changing, he said one night. So are you, she replied. That unsettled him more than defiance ever had. Sophia made her move soon after, not against Adrian, against Elena. A message arrived through a channel Elena hadn't known existed, anonymous, precise, cruel. You can't protect what you don't control, and you don't control him. Elena stared at the words, her heart steady rather than racing. She finally understood the shape of the battlefield. This was no longer about survival. It was about choice. That night, as Adrian slept beside her, his presence warm, heavy, dangerously comforting, Elena lay awake, staring into the dark. She loved him. That truth terrified her more than any enemy ever could, because loving Adrian Blackwood meant loving a man who would burn the world to keep her. And Elena was no longer sure she wanted to be saved that way. She pressed a hand over her belly, feeling the quiet, stubborn life within. For you, she whispered silently. I'll learn to fight my own way. Outside, the city pulsed on, unaware that a war was unfolding not in shadows or streets, but in the heart of a woman who had finally stopped being just a protected piece on the board, and was preparing to become a player. Elena chose the night carefully, not a stormy one that would draw attention, not a quiet one either. She waited for a night that felt ordinary, forgettable, the kind that slipped past memory without resistance. Adrian had flown to Chicago for a meeting he insisted could not be postponed. He had argued with her before leaving, not in anger, but in that restrained way that meant fear was doing most of the speaking. I'll be back tomorrow, he said, his hands firm on her shoulders. Don't leave the house. She looked into his eyes and nodded. It was not the first lie she had told him. When the engines of his plane vanished into the distance, Elena exhaled for what felt like the first time in weeks. The house settled into its nocturnal rhythm. Guards changed shifts. Lights dimmed. Silence spread, soft and deceptive. She moved slowly, deliberately. Everything she needed had been prepared days ago. Documents hidden inside the lining of a coat. Cash transferred through layers of accounts. A phone untraceable to Adrian's world. Even the route had been memorized not once, but dozens of times, traced in her mind until it felt like muscle memory. Her hand trembled as she pressed it against her stomach. I'm sorry, she whispered to the life inside her. But this is the only way. The car waiting beyond the eastern gate did not bear Adrian's insignia. It was anonymous, forgettable. The driver did not speak. He didn't need to. As the gate slid open and the estate fell away behind her, Elena felt something inside her fracture relief and grief tangled so tightly she could no longer tell them apart. She did not look back. Adrian sensed it before he was told. The meeting in Chicago blurred into insignificance the moment his phone vibrated with an alert that should never have triggered. His hand tightened around the device, his expression going cold. Elena's tracker, one of his men said carefully. It went offline. Adrian stood so abruptly the chair scraped violently against the floor. Impossible, he said. But he already knew. He was on his private jet within minutes, fury coiling through him with a precision that terrified even those closest to him. He did not shout. He did not curse. Silence followed him like a blade. She planned this, he said quietly. How long? No signs, his lieutenant replied. She covered her tracks. Adrian closed his eyes for a fraction of a second. He had taught her too well. Elena disappeared into the city. Not New York, not anywhere Adrian would look first. She moved west, then south, erasing herself with each mile. She changed her hair, her clothes, her posture. She stopped moving like a protected woman and learned how to become invisible. For the first time since that night in the alley, she felt free. But freedom had a cost. She woke each morning with dread coiled beneath her ribs, expecting at any moment to see Adrian's shadow stretching across her path. She avoided mirrors, avoided news, avoided thinking too far ahead. Love did not fade just because distance existed. If anything, it grew sharper. At night, she dreamed of him not as the man who commanded armies of loyalty, but as the one who had held her hand when she was sick, who had listened when she spoke of childhood memories, who had whispered promises she knew he believed. "You'll hate me," she murmured one evening, sitting alone in a rented room that smelled faintly of dust and citrus cleaner. "But at least you won't own me." The baby stirred faintly. She took that as agreement. Adrian tore his world apart looking for her. Alliances fractured. Businesses stalled. Men who had never seen him lose control watched as he dismantled entire networks for a single name, a single trace. She didn't take help from Sophia. His intelligence chief reported, "No contact, no money trail." "That means she learned," Adrian said. His jaw tightened. Pride flickered briefly beneath the rage. Then it died. Days turned into weeks. Still nothing. Adrian stopped sleeping. He replayed every conversation, every look she had given him, searching for the moment he should have realized she was already gone. He remembered the way she had softened, how she had stopped resisting. He had mistaken adaptation for surrender. "She left because of me," he said one night to an empty room. No one contradicted him. The first message arrived without warning. Not a threat, not a demand. A photograph. Elena stood in sunlight, her face turned away from the camera, one hand resting protectively over her belly. No location, no metadata, just proof. She was alive. Adrian stared at the image until his chest ached. "Find her," he said hoarsely, "but don't touch her." That order sent shockwaves through his inner circle. She ran. One man said carefully, "You don't chase something that wants to be free." Adrian's gaze lifted, sharp and unforgiving. "You don't understand." "No, she didn't run from me," Adrian said. "She ran because she loves me." Silence followed. "And love," he continued, "is the only thing more dangerous than fear." Elena felt it the moment the world shifted again. A glance held too long, a question that carried too much weight. She had been careful, but Adrian was relentless. The final mistake came when she went to a clinic under her own name. She knew it the instant she stepped outside. The air felt wrong. A man brushed past her shoulder, not threatening, not familiar, but his presence sent a chill through her. She didn't scream, she didn't run, she turned. Adrian stood across the street, not in a suit, not surrounded by men, just him. Their eyes met. The world narrowed. He crossed the distance slowly, as if afraid she might vanish if he moved too fast. When he stopped in front of her, his hands hovered uselessly at his sides. "You disappeared," he said. She lifted her chin. "I left." His jaw tightened. "With my child." "With our child," she corrected. That struck harder than any slap. "I would have given you anything," Adrian said. "You would have given me everything except choice," she replied softly. Pain flickered across his face, real, unguarded. "Come home," he said. Elena's hand tightened over her stomach. "No." The word hung between them, fragile and final. Adrian inhaled slowly. "Then tell me what you want." She met his gaze, tears burning but unfallen. "I want you to stop chasing me." Silence stretched. Then, slowly, Adrian stepped back. "If you go," he said, voice rough, "I don't know how to let you stay gone." Elena took a step away. Then another. "I'm not asking you to let go," she said. I'm asking you to trust me. For the first time since they met. Adrian did not reach for control. He let her walk past him. As Elena disappeared into the crowd, her heart breaking with every step, Adrian remained where he was alone, wounded in a way no bullet had ever managed. He had lost her, not to an enemy, but to her own will. And that, he realized, might be the most devastating defeat of his life. The city did not notice when Adrian Blackwood began to fall apart. New York continued to glitter, indifferent and relentless. Markets opened and closed, traffic snarled. People lived entire lives unaware that one of the most carefully controlled men in the underground world had lost the single thing anchoring him to reason. Elena Moore, gone not hidden, not stolen, but gone by choice. That distinction haunted him. Adrian returned to his penthouse alone. The silence there was different from before, no longer heavy with tension, but hollow, echoing. Her presence lingered in the smallest details: a book left open on the coffee table, a mug abandoned by the window, a scarf forgotten on the back of a chair. He picked it up one night, pressing the fabric to his palm as if it might still hold her warmth. "You should have stopped me," he muttered into the empty room. No one answered. Control had always been Adrian's language. He controlled markets, men, outcomes. He controlled fear so precisely it bent others into loyalty without the need for force. For years, that had been enough, more than enough. Until Elena, she had not challenged him with power or threats. She had undone him with something far more dangerous choice. By walking away, she had stripped him of the illusion that love could be engineered the same way empires were. "She's not coming back," his lieutenant said quietly during a late-night briefing. Adrian didn't look up. "She will. Because you'll force her." The silence that followed was sharp. "No," Adrian said finally. "Because I won't." The words surprised even him. Elena moved again, not because she wanted to, but because staying still was a risk she could no longer afford. She crossed state lines under a new name, settling briefly in a coastal town where the air smelled of salt and anonymity. The ocean calmed her its vastness, a reminder that some things could not be owned. She found work under the table, assisting at a small clinic. No questions, no records, just quiet gratitude from people who needed help and didn't care who she had been before. At night, she sat on the edge of her narrow bed, one hand resting over her belly, the other clutching the ache she refused to name. She missed him. Not the power, not the danger. The man who had watched her sleep when she was sick. The man who had listened when she spoke about nothing at all. The man who had promised protection when the world felt too sharp. "You don't get to love him," she told herself softly. "And you don't get to go back." The baby shifted, a gentle reminder of consequences that could not be undone. Back in New York, Adrian made a decision that shocked everyone who depended on him. He stepped away. Meetings were postponed, deals delayed, commands delegated to men who had never held such authority before. The vacuum he left behind was immediate and dangerous. "You can't just disappear," his inner circle protested. "Rivals will move. Let them," Adrian replied. And they did. Territories were challenged. Alliances tested. Sophia Carter, watching from the edges, smiled as she sensed the imbalance she had waited for. She approached Adrian, not with rage this time, but with sympathy. "You've lost focus," she said, sitting across from him in a quiet lounge. "She broke you." Adrian didn't bother looking at her. "You mistake absence for weakness." "Then prove me wrong," Sophia said softly. "Take back what's yours." He finally met her gaze, eyes cold and distant. "She was never mine." Sophia laughed, sharp and disbelieving. "You built cages for less. That's why she left." The words landed like a verdict. Sophia's expression hardened. "You'll regret this." Adrian rose. "I already do." The turning point came without warning. Elena collapsed at work. It wasn't dramatic, no screams. No blood, but the pain was sudden, fierce enough to steal her breath. She barely registered the clinic's frantic movements. The rushed examination, the hushed whispers. Stress, the doctor said gently. You need stability, safety. Elena closed her eyes. She knew exactly who could give her that, and exactly why she couldn't ask. But the truth had teeth. That night, she wrote a message she never intended to send. I'm scared. She stared at the words for a long time before deleting them. Across the country, Adrian woke from a restless sleep with her name on his lips. They found each other not through pursuit, but collapse. Adrian received word of a complication at a coastal clinic, a pregnant woman matching Elena's description. Admitted under an alias too clean to be accidental. His hand trembled as he read the report. Get the car, he said. This time, he went alone. Elena was sitting by the window when he entered the room. She sensed him before she saw him, the familiar weight of his presence, quieter now, restrained. When she turned, their eyes met, and the world narrowed to a fragile, breathless stillness. You shouldn't be here, she said. I know, Adrian replied. She searched his face for anger, for possession. Found none. Only fear. I didn't come to take you, he said quickly. I came to ask. Her throat tightened. Ask what? How you're doing, he said, and whether you want me to stay. Silence. Elena's hands trembled in her lap. If you stay, everything changes. Yes, Adrian said. That's the point. She looked at him, this man who had ruled through control, now standing before her without armor. I won't go back to a cage, she said. There won't be one, he replied. Not for you, not for our child. She laughed softly, bitter and afraid. You don't know how to live without control. No, he admitted. But I'm learning. Tears slipped free before she could stop them. Adrian didn't touch her. He waited. Finally, she whispered. Sit. He did. They sat together in silence. Two broken lines trying to realign. Outside, the ocean roared wild, untamed, impossible to own. For the first time, Adrian Blackwood did not try to bend it to his will. He listened. And Elena, watching him from the corner of her eye, wondered if love, real love, might begin not with possession, but with restraint. The days that followed were unlike anything Elena had known before. Adrian did not stay at her side the way he once would have. He did not take over the clinic, did not summon doctors or security teams, did not redraw the boundaries of her world with his presence. Instead, he remained careful, almost distant. He visited once a day, sometimes only to ask how she was feeling, sometimes to sit in silence by the window. His gaze drifting toward the ocean, as if he were learning its language, how it moved without permission, how it refused to be commanded. That restraint unsettled her more than his possessiveness ever had. You don't have to do this, she said one afternoon, watching him stand by the door as if unsure whether to cross the threshold. You could leave, go back to your life. Adrian shook his head. That life no longer exists the way it did. And if I ask you to stay away, she pressed. He met her gaze steadily. Then I will. The simplicity of his answer stole her breath. She had spent so long bracing for resistance that she didn't know what to do with surrender. At night, Elena lay awake listening to the ocean and to the quiet hum of fear beneath her thoughts. Loving Adrian had never been the danger. Loving him and staying had been... She remembered the estate, the guards, the invisible walls built from concern and control. She remembered how easily protection had turned into confinement. I won't lose myself again, she whispered to the dark. Her hand moved instinctively over her belly. The child stirred, grounding her. News traveled fast in Adrian's world. His absence had consequences some anticipated, others less so. Deals fell apart. Rivals tested boundaries long held sacred. Power vacuums bred ambition. You're bleeding territory, his lieutenant said over the phone one night. If you don't return soon, someone will try to replace you. Let them try, Adrian replied. That's not like you. No, Adrian agreed. It's not. He ended the call and stood alone in the narrow kitchen of the rented house he'd taken near the coast. Modest, unguarded, anonymous. The man who once commanded entire floors of glass and steel now cooked his own meals, cleaned his own space, lived without witnesses. He had never felt more exposed, or more honest. Sophia Carter did not accept defeat quietly. She arrived in the coastal town under the guise of coincidence, her presence cutting through the fragile peace like a blade. Elena recognized her instantly from across the street, the confidence, the controlled anger barely disguised beneath elegance. Sophia smiled when she noticed Elena watching. They spoke without raised voices, without spectacle. You're still here, Sophia said. I thought you'd disappear again. Elena held her gaze. I'm not running anymore. Sophia laughed softly. You think staying makes you stronger? Elena replied, I think choosing does. Sophia's eyes hardened. You're standing in the ruins of something you don't understand. Adrian built his world with blood. You don't walk away from that unscathed. I'm not asking him to walk away, Elena said quietly. I'm asking him to stop dragging me with him. Sophia stepped closer, lowering her voice. He will always choose power. When the choice comes, he won't hesitate. Elena shook her head. You're wrong. Sophia studied her for a long moment, then smiled sadly. I hope you're right, for the child's sake. She walked away without another word. Elena stood frozen, her heart pounding not with fear, but with the weight of what was coming. The choice arrived sooner than expected. A call in the middle of the night, Adrian's voice, controlled but urgent. They've moved, he said. If I don't return to New York now, people will die. Elena sat up slowly. And if you go, they'll stop, he said. At least for now. She closed her eyes. This was the moment she had been preparing for. The moment every instinct told her would define them both. If you go back, she said carefully, I can't come with you. Adrian's silence stretched long and heavy. I know, he said. And I won't be hidden, she continued. I won't be protected at the cost of my voice. I know, he repeated. Her throat tightened. This isn't a test. I'm not treating it like one. She looked at him, then really looked, and saw a man torn between two worlds, neither of which would fully accept him anymore. I won't wait for you, she said softly. Not the way I did before. Adrian stepped closer, stopping just within reach. I'm not asking you to. Tears burned her eyes. Then why does this feel like goodbye? He lifted his hand, hesitating before resting it over her heart. Because sometimes love means choosing distance, so it doesn't become destruction. Adrian left at dawn. No promises, no demands. Just a single kiss pressed to her forehead, gentle, reverent, restrained. Whatever happens, he said, I will never cage you again. Elena watched him walk away, her chest aching with something dangerously close to peace. New York burned quietly in his absence. Adrian returned not as a tyrant reclaiming power, but as a man drawing lines no one expected. He dismantled alliances built on cruelty, cut off revenue streams tied to collateral damage. He made enemies dangerous ones. You're weakening yourself, his rivals whispered. No, Adrian replied. I'm choosing what I can live with. The price was steep. By the time the dust settled, he had lost half of what he once ruled. But he was still standing. Weeks passed. Elena felt stronger, calmer. The baby's movements grew more pronounced, grounding her in the present rather than the fear of what might come. One evening, as the sun dipped low over the ocean, a familiar figure appeared on the horizon. Adrian walked toward her slowly, his silhouette outlined by fire and gold. She didn't run. She didn't retreat. You came back, she said. Yes, he replied. Not because I had to, because you wanted to, because I chose to. She studied him, really studied him, and saw the cost written in the lines of his face. "What did it cost you?" she asked. "Everything I couldn't take with me," he said. Silence stretched between them, filled with waves and wind and possibility. Elena took a breath. "I don't know what comes next." Adrian met her gaze, steady and open. "Neither do I." For the first time, uncertainty didn't feel like a threat. It felt like space. Space to build something that wasn't owned, guarded, or forced. Space for love to exist without chains. And as Elena rested her hand over her belly, feeling life move beneath her skin, she realized the hardest choice had already been made. Not between freedom and love, but between the past they survived and the future they were brave enough to imagine together. The morning Elena went into labor, the ocean was calm, no storms, no sirens, just the slow, steady rhythm of waves folding into the shore, as if the world itself had decided to breathe with her. She woke with a sharp pain low in her abdomen, not frightening, just undeniable, the kind of pain that carried purpose. She sat up slowly, one hand braced against the mattress, the other resting over her belly. "It's time," she whispered. Adrian was awake before she finished the sentence. He didn't panic. That surprised her most of all. He moved with quiet precision, calling the doctor they had chosen together, helping her dress, steadying her when the contractions intensified. No orders barked into phones, no guards flooding the space, just him, present and focused, his attention anchored entirely on her. "You're doing perfectly," he said softly as they drove along the coastal road, his hand firm around hers. Elena met his gaze, breath unsteady but determined. "You don't get to take credit for this." A faint smile touched his lips. "I wouldn't dare." The delivery room was filled with light. Elena gripped the sheets, pain cresting and receding like the tide outside. Adrian stayed at her side the entire time, letting her set the pace, letting her decide when to hold on and when to push him away. At one point, exhaustion blurred her vision, and doubt crept in. "I can't," she whispered. Adrian leaned close, his forehead resting against hers. "You can't. Not because you have to, because you want to." The distinction mattered. And when the cry finally filled the room, small, fierce, alive, Elena broke down in tears. Adrian froze. For a man who had faced death without flinching, the sight of his child undid him completely. "She's perfect," Elena murmured, cradling the baby against her chest. Adrian reached out hesitantly, as if afraid the moment might shatter if he touched it, when his fingers brushed their daughter's tiny hand and she curled instinctively around him. Something in his chest gave way. "I won't fail her," he said quietly. "Or you." Elena looked at him, exhausted and radiant all at once. "Then don't promise. Just choose us. Every day." He nodded. "I will." They named her Lena, not after anyone powerful or symbolic, just a name that felt light, unburdened by legacy. The days that followed were gentle in a way Elena hadn't believed possible. Adrian cooked badly and tried anyway. He learned how to hold Lena without fear, how to soothe her cries, how to sit in silence and simply exist. The man who once ruled through control now asked questions. "Does she need more light? Am I holding her right? Are you sure you're okay?" Elena watched him change, not dramatically, not overnight, but in the quiet accumulation of choices. He didn't return to New York. Not fully. His empire shifted hands, restructured into something quieter, less brutal. He kept his influence but surrendered the parts that demanded constant bloodshed. It wasn't redemption. It was responsibility. And it cost him. But he never looked back. One evening, months later, they stood on the beach as the sun sank low, Lena asleep in Elena's arms. Adrian slipped his jacket around both of them, careful not to restrict, only to warm. "You know," Elena said softly, "there was a time I thought love meant losing myself. Adrian watched the horizon. So did I. She turned to him. But this feels different. He met her gaze. Because it is. He reached into his pocket, not with urgency, not with expectation, and held out a simple ring. No diamonds. No declarations carved in stone. I'm not asking you to belong to me, he said. I'm asking if you'll walk beside me, freely, knowing you can leave and choosing not to. Elena felt tears rise, not from fear this time, but from certainty. She smiled. Yes. He slipped the ring onto her finger, hands steady, reverent. No chains, no cages, only choice. Years later, people would still whisper Adrian Blackwood's name. But the stories changed. They spoke less of fear and more of restraint, less of domination and more of loyalty earned without force. Those who truly knew him understood the reason. Because the most powerful thing Adrian Blackwood ever did was let go. Elena watched him from the porch of their coastal home, Lena laughing as Adrian chased her across the sand. The man who once bent the world now knelt willingly to tie a child's shoelaces. Her heart felt full in a way no luxury, no protection, no grand gesture could ever replicate. Love, she had learned, was not possession. It was presence. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in gold and quiet promise, Elena knew this was not the ending of their story. It was the beginning they had earned.